Last week, we looked at the interaction between Moses and Aaron and how Aaron became an ally to Moses. Now, today we're rewinding just a bit and focusing on that first encounter between God and Moses at the burning bush when God reveals God's name. Hear these excerpts from the book of Exodus, chapters 2 through 3. A long time passed and the Egyptian king died. The Israelites were still groaning because of their hard work. They cried out, and their cry to be rescued from the hard work rose up to God. God heard their cry of grief, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God looked at the Israelites, and God understood. Moses was taking care of the flock for his father-in-law Jethro, Midian's priest. He led his flock out to the edge of the desert, and he came to God's mountain called Horeb. The Lord's messenger appeared to him in a flame of fire in the middle of a bush. Moses saw that the bush was in flames, but it didn't burn up. Then Moses said to himself, "Let me check out this amazing sight and find out why the bush isn't burning up." When the Lord saw that he was coming to look, God called to him out of the bush, "Moses, Moses." Moses said, "I'm here." Then the Lord said, "Don't come any closer. Take off your sandals because you are standing on holy ground." He continued, "I am the God of your father, Abraham's God, Isaac's God, and Jacob's God." Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, "I've clearly seen my people oppressed in Egypt. I've heard their cry of injustice because of their slave masters. I know about their pain. I've come down to rescue them from the Egyptians in order to take them out of that land and bring them to a good and broad land, a land that's full of milk and honey, a place where the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites and the Jebusites all live. Now the Israelites' cries of injustice have reached me. I've seen just how much the Egyptians have oppressed them. So get going. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I to go to Pharaoh and to bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God said, "I'll be with you, and this will show you that I'm the one who sent you. After you bring the people out of Egypt, you will come back here and worship God on this mountain." But Moses said to God, "If I now come to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your ancestors has sent me to you,' they're going to ask me, 'What's this God's name?' What am I supposed to say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am. So say to the Israelites, 'I am has sent me to you.'" God continued, "Say to the Israelites, 'The Lord, the God of your ancestors, Abraham's God, Isaac's God, and Jacob's God, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is how all generations will remember me.'" This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I was talking to a friend the other day. We were just catching up, and he was telling me all about this really horrible day that he'd had. It was one of those days that was filled with work stuff and relationship stuff and family stuff and just all sorts of life stuff. It kind of just hit him all at once. It was one of those days. And he just felt really frustrated by everything, and he said wound up with it all. It was getting to him, and he felt like he was just walking around holding on to all this tension that he didn't want to, and he didn't have the energy to. So he told me he got home that night after that day and just needed to vent. So he was telling me that he was talking to his partner about what was going on, how frustrated he was with everything that was going on, and it turned into kind of a heated conversation just because he was so tense. And in the middle of this conversation, he was just talking and accidentally slipped up a word, got a little tongue-tied and made a little bleh, bleh, bleh sound. And right after he did that, his partner smiled and looked him right in the eye and said, bleh, 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 bleh. And then he paused and he chuckled a little bit. Then he laughed a little bit more. And before he knew it, both of them were just on the ground, uncontrollably laughing with tears in their eyes because it was just so random and funny. They just couldn't stop any of this laughter. And it was that little moment that turned a devastating, frustrating day around because of a little bit of playfulness. Have you ever had one of those moments where you were just so worn out, so wound up, and then someone or something accidentally makes you smile or laugh, and suddenly, at least for a moment, things are all better? I love those moments because they're magic. They're magic because someone takes a risk to be playful. And sometimes a little bit of playfulness is that magic medicine to soothe or heal a perplexing or even a painful situation. Now, today we're going to look at a pivotal moment, if not the pivotal moment in this scripture passage, this remarkable moment where Moses learns God's name, which is a big deal. Names convey meaning and they connect us more deeply with one another. They build intimacy and relationship. The lead up to this moment has Moses in exile, if you remember, away from his people, the Israelites who are hurting, they're suffering and crying out for help in Egypt. And Moses is away from all of this with all of the complicated emotions that carries. In the midst of that, Moses is out at work, tending to the flock, tending to the animals, and he sees this bush erupt in flames. God calls out to Moses and tells him that it is he who will go bring the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses responds a little confused and says, "Now, how in the world will they believe me? What is your name? What should I tell them that your name is?" God responds with this, "I am who I am. This is my name forever. This is how all generations will remember me. I am who I am." This phrase, it comes from a 4-letter Hebrew word. This is the Hebrew name of God. Read aloud, it's pronounced Yahweh, and in certain traditions, particularly the Jewish tradition, this word, this name is so sacred that it is not to be spoken aloud. Now, as I said earlier, names convey meaning, and this name is no exception. The translation of this name has a long history of debate as to exactly what it means because it's such a unique word. And we typically see it translated as what I said earlier, I am who I am. It's very vague, it's mysterious. But this name also carries with it a sense of looking towards the future. So another translation you often see is, I will be who I will be. Still really vague, still really mysterious and enigmatic. But also how we hear this name affects what it means, the tone of it. I think typically, I'm this way anyway, we might hear this maybe in, let's call it a Wizard of Oz voice. You know, Moses asks, what's this God's name? And God says, I will be who I will be. You know, the standard voice of God that you might hear in a movie. But the more I have sat with the story, the more I hear it a little bit differently. Here Moses is afraid, alone, not knowing what's going on, trying to make sense of everything, very confused, and asking God, who are you? And I hear God say, I will be who I will be, with this level of playfulness and sass that tells Moses that things are going to be okay. You're afraid. Trust me, I got this. Other translators have suggested something similar. Things like, I am who I am, and it's not your business to know my name, or I can be, and I can do anything I want. So rather than this all-powerful voice of command and power, I'm wondering if we can imagine this moment as God inviting Moses kind of into a game of sorts. What if we can imagine this as revealing God's fun character, a character that's mysterious and close and unexpected, but full of energy and excited to show you what's next? This is, after all, a voice coming from a random fire in a bush. Now, I've begun to see this moment as God having come really close to Moses, inviting him into this special relationship and saying, I'll always be here with you. You're going to find me in all sorts of places in your life. You won't believe what's coming next. Let's do this fun thing together. Playfulness is a way of disarming. And here God uses playfulness to respond to the fear Moses has by offering him a chance for a different type of reaction. An invitation to trust and maybe even take a new direction. Instead of fear, joy is now an option. God enters Moses' broken world with play to show him that things are going to be okay. Play, or finding those moments of just delight and joy and spontaneity, is a human need, and we need to experience the miracle of silliness and laughter, especially in those times when the things around us are nothing to laugh at. Sometimes we need to shake off the world and dive into imagination and fun. The writer Anne Lamott reminds us in this way. She writes, oh my God, what if you wake up someday and you're 65 or 75 and you never got your memoir or novel written? You didn't go swimming in warm pools and oceans all those years because your thighs were jiggly and you had a nice, comfortable belly. Or you were so strung out on perfectionism and people-pleasing that you forgot to have a big, juicy, creative life of imagination and radical silliness and staring off into space like when you were a kid. It's going to break your heart. Don't let this happen. Play is sacred. Now, here's another reminder from LGBTQ culture. Take a look at the art of drag. This is art in which folks play exaggerated notions of gender and gender expression and clothing and hair. It's an art form often born, like Moses, out of exile and adversity by queer people who were told, you don't belong in this world the way that you are or the way that you look. And so in the space of that, these artists chose to respond with the power of playfulness. Through parody and creativity and humor and imagination, drag performers proclaim that in times of challenge, you can actually decide to have fun. RuPaul, who's a big voice, but not the only voice in the drag world, she puts it like this: drag reminds culture to not take itself too seriously. We deconstruct the world and then rebuild it into something better without all of the fear and superstition that marks our experience as humans. It is through this playfulness that we are actually empowered to challenge the reality around us, to forge a new direction through fear and towards something better, not unlike the promised land that God invites Moses to envision and journey toward. Play reminds us that we don't have to be afraid. Play reminds us that there's a joy simmering under the surface of everything. Play reminds us that there is more to life than the easy assumptions that we make. Play is sacred, and it's part of the essence of who God is and who God calls us to be. Now, one of the most playful metaphors that our tradition has used to describe God has been the playful artistry of dance. Dance invites the body to play with motion and shape and rhythm and form in harmony with music. And as early Christian theology was forming, theologians borrowed a word from Greek theater, from Greek plays, to describe how the Trinity functioned. One of the ways this Greek word translates is circle dance, and it describes this movement of persons as they change places with one another over and over and over and over again in a circle. And this dancing motion was one way to describe the mystery of the Trinity, this dance in which Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are with and in one another always. And what I love about that idea is that it paints this picture of God not as a singular, static, motionless Wizard of Oz voice, but instead, it's a God in a never-ending, playful dance that surrounds each one of us and all creation. What a beautiful, powerful, and inviting way to imagine God. Now, today I want to introduce you all now to Mercury Van Sciver. He is a dancer. He has danced and toured with ballet companies, and he also dances here in the city with the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. This week, we talked a little bit about where he's experienced God in his life. Here's a little bit of our conversation. Mercury, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so glad that you're here to talk with us and to dance with us. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I wanted to start with your art. We're talking with artists this whole month, and you are an amazing dancer. And I was just curious if you could talk to us a little bit about why, for you, dance is the way that you express yourself in the world.
Well, for me, it's always been a part of my life. Definitely since the beginning, I feel like I've always just been moving and creating and really, I guess, finding my voice through dance. And it's something that's always been there. And it's always like, I would say, a reflection of how I see life and how I see myself. For me, with dance, it's definitely it's a release, because there's a point that of exhaustion, I would say. There's an aching in the body. There's a tiredness of the breath. And, getting through a whole show of dancing, for sure, there's a moment where you don't know if you're going to make it, and you almost can't hold on to any extra baggage. You really just have to surrender and let it go. these bodies are so temporary. And that's also why it's such a learning lesson, because I don't have the same body I did when I started dancing, clearly, throughout all these years. So it's definitely like a reminder to surrender and let go.
How does dance connect to you spiritually?
I would say it starts with the spirit, I think everything, at least for how I choose to go about life and how I like to walk in my life, is always about spirit. I want to listen before I can react or respond. And I also want to be used as a vehicle. Spirit is life, and it gives value. And I feel like by connecting to spirit, that you really get to appreciate the beauty of life.
We're talking about spirituality. Let's talk about your spiritual background, and the spiritual journey you've been on. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I grew up in the church. I danced in church. I choreographed. I sang some. I went to a private school, a Christian school, all the way through till middle school. And so I was just very consumed in that, I would say. It's so interesting. Your roots are so much a part of you still. And so everywhere I go, whatever I do, I still kind of have both that background, and also just it's still a part of me. I take it with me. I didn't grow up going to church on Sundays, and that's a lot of churches are on Sundays. And so for me, it's never been about the place or the time or the this or that. Churches, they are a physical place, but church is not the building itself. It's, how can I have it in my heart and have it live and breathe and in my essence.
Well, let's take a look at the Bible story that we have been looking at this month, Moses in the burning bush, which having a church background is something that at least you've probably heard a little bit about or have some familiarity with. I'm curious what popped up during this reading for you.
It made me really think about, I guess, the message and how God will always be there for you. I think, at times we get scared. We don't know what's going to happen. We get worried about, the struggles of life, and knowing that God is on your side and on your back and really guiding you, and knowing that you're already going to have the victory, and knowing that you're going to succeed, or, there's a level of comfort and, I guess, ease that happens. I'm a person that likes to be on the go, and sometimes I'm not sure exactly where the road is taking me, and even kind of the way I choose to live life, and kind of I guess the freedom that I live in myself. It's the trust of knowing that I'm actually going to be okay.
So you prepared a wonderful performance for us, a beautiful dance performance. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about where the inspiration for the piece you chose came from and how it relates to our story today.
So I got the inspiration definitely like after, reading the story, and there's such a journey within the story from, the beginning, and how like we really don't know where life is going to take us. And that is definitely where you have to trust. I made this piece, and it made me really just think of moving forward, like, although we don't like a situation, or we may not know what's happening, or even by having the clues and the awareness of moving forward, it's kind of still like, we don't know, but you still have to keep going. The music is from the Prince of Egypt, and I wanted to kind of use the music from the plagues, as in that's kind of the dark distractions, and the flesh of the surroundings. Like, Moses gets a visit, through the burning bush, and there was information being passed. And it's kind of hard to even imagine at times until you're in the situation. And so I wanted to kind of jump forward into going into the plagues, because at times we know what's going to happen, or like, even though we're prepared in a way, you don't necessarily know until you're in it. And nothing lasts forever. And so I wanted to go into that kind of a darker mentality as a warning to use to move forward.
Well, thank you, Mercury, for your time and for your talent and artistry. We are so grateful for you. We're excited to see what you have for us. But thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here and hope you all enjoy and got something from it.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at Mercury and the Prince of Egypt.
Once I thought the chance to make you laugh was all I ever wanted. And even now, I wish that God had chose another. Serving as your foe on his behalf is the last thing that I wanted. This was my home. All this pain and devastation, how it tortures me inside. All the innocent who suffer from your stubbornness and pride. I send the darkness on the wind, such as the world has never seen. On every leaf, on every stalk, until there's nothing left to read. I send my sword, I send my sword, thus saith the Lord. Who I called brother, why must you call down another blow? I send my sword, I send my sword. Let my people go. Cold brother, how could you have come to hate me so? Is this what you wanted? I said the sword, I said the Then let my heart be hardened, and never mind how high the cost may grow. This will still be so. I will never let your